It's March 6, 2023, and I'm at Trout Lake Park in Vancouver. About 2 years ago, I went for a long sound walk with climate activist and now politician Anjali Appadurai, which became episode 23 of season 2 of this podcast. And it was the first time that Anjali did a sound walk, and it was a very powerful moment for me because I've often thought back to what Anjali said that day, and it has informed my work as a climate activist and on the role of art in the climate emergency. I encourage you to read it, to listen to it. Today we're going to hear an excerpt from that conversation near the end about the issue of privilege, which comes back again and again in this sounding modernity season. So here's Anjali from our sound walk in 2021.
And I think this really meshes with what I was talking about, sort of to circle back to the beginning of the conversation. We were talking about who's the we, and privilege is the central question to that. Looking at the issue as this multi-layered thing, and looking at it as a spectrum of history, where what have the power dynamics been in, say, you can take a slice of history, you can say the last 500 years. What were the advantages? Privilege can go back as far as you want it to go back, right? And of course it's so nuanced, it's not every white guy has this much privilege, but you do have a privilege that goes back hundreds of years. And I think one aspect of privilege a lot of people leave out is this economic aspect, right, of class and resources. And that to me is, it's not often talked about in the climate conversation, but it's a huge piece of it. Because when we talk about the extinction of our species, this extinction doesn't happen overnight. It happens in a spectrum. Who are the last ones standing? It's those with the most resources. Who are the first ones to go? It's those with the least, the most disenfranchised. So I don't think you can talk about climate without talking about privilege, ultimately. And I think it's on each of us to unpack that for ourselves, and to bring that into the conversation.
Back in 2023 again now. I'm going to skip ahead to another excerpt of our conversation from 2021 with Anjali. This time she talks about privilege in a more global context.
And I'll just leave with one more thought. Sure. There's a lot of framings about how to divide up in an equitable way the remaining emissions, the sort of carbon budget of the world. So carbon budget is a framing in and of itself, and then there's this other framing that floats around the right to atmospheric space, and how if you look at atmospheric space as a human right, and if you divide up how much we have left in the world, how many people have way more than what would be their fair share? How many people have way less? And that's a deep question of privilege as well. And talking about the global north, I mean, that really plays into our global privilege.
And my question to you is, what are the privileges in your life?